Good afternoon, everybody. Anthony Aniano here from RotoBaller Radio and RotoBaller.com with the early look at the Week 9 Fantasy Football Waiver Wire. Guys, don't forget, for that waiver wire, I record Sunday evening before the Sunday night and Monday night games. That's why it's called the early look at the waiver wire, so some things can change. We got the early injury report to look at. Roster percentages are based on Yahoo formats. Obviously, can be different depending upon the leagues and formats you use. Keep in mind, Week 9, 6 teams on a bye. Brutal week. Cleveland Browns, no Nick Chubb, Amari Cooper, David Njoku dealing with an injury. Hopefully he returns after the bye. Dallas Cowboys on a bye. Dak Prescott coming off a big game. Zeke Elliott, Tony Pollard, a big game. CeeDee Lamb as well. Denver Broncos, Jerry Jeudy, who's on the trade block. Be mindful of that. Cortland Sutton, the running game, which is a bit of a mess. Be aware of that situation as well. The Giants, Saquon Barkley. The Pittsburgh Steelers, Najee Harris. Maybe Chase Claypool, a little Pickens. And the 49ers and all their pieces. Another week for Deebo Samuel to get healthy. Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey, Jimmy Garoppolo, George Kittle, and their defense, obviously. So teams are on bye, so we got to look. So we'll start at the quarterback position. And my number one quarterback ad of the week has to be Justin Fields of the Chicago Bears at this point. We really do now have to give Justin Fields his due. 41% rostered on Yahoo. And in his last 3 games, now quarterbacks, I look at it from a 6-point per passing touchdown. So 4 points per less. You're going to subtract a little bit there. But Justin Fields in his last 3 games, 20, 25, and now this week, 30 fantasy points. Most of it with his legs. This week he goes 17 of 23. Only 151 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, but rushes the ball 8 times for 60 yards and a rushing touchdown. Finished with just over 30 fantasy points. Those points, like I said, 3 straight weeks of over 20. And in a week where you're losing Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson to an extent, maybe Jimmy Garoppolo, maybe you're scrambling for a streaming quarterback, Justin Fields is an option. Maybe you've had enough of Aaron Rodgers' performances, Tom Brady, whomever it may be. Good matchup for Fields against Miami, who did allow points to the Detroit Lions in Week 8. At number 2 at the quarterback position, Jared Goff, 54% rostered. That offense is getting healthy, and you saw Goff perform once again. Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift in the backfield. Williams did the heavy lifting. DeAndre Swift catching passes out of the backfield. Both got in the end zone. Okay, Amon-Ra St. Brown was a factor again this week for Detroit. Jared Goff threw for 321 yards and a touchdown, just over 20 fantasy points. And the Detroit Lions faced the Green Bay Packers in Week 9. Up third is Marcus Mariota in that fun game he was in on Sunday. He goes 20 of 28, 253, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, runs 6 times for 43 yards. 3 of his last 4 games, he scored over 20 fantasy points. He finished Week 8 with just over 28 fantasy points. And it could be a high scoring event, Week 9 against the Chargers. And finally, my 4th quarterback is Andy Dalton, who I just think is cementing his spot as the starting quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. He's only 14% rostered. He's the lowest rostered player on the quarterback list here, with Justin Fields at 41, Goff at 54, Marcus Mariota at 26%, and Andy Dalton, like I said, 14%. 22 of 30, 229 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's got a combined 60 fantasy points and 6 TDs over his last 2 weeks, finishing this week with 21 fantasy points. A game on next Sunday, Week 9, against the Baltimore Ravens, which should allow him to pick up some yardage and passing touchdowns. As we know, you could throw the ball against the Baltimore Ravens defense. Now, the running back position. Not much help, right? You're not getting a Kenneth Walker emerging here. But a few players to be mindful of in Atlanta. Tyler Algier, my number 1 running back ad of the week. Atlanta goes against the Chargers next week. Algier, 54% rostered. And another productive game. 14 carries for 39 yards. It is a timeshare with Caleb Huntley, who we'll talk about in a minute. But nonetheless, 14 of 39. And I give Tyler Algier the edge over Caleb Huntley because Tyler Algier is involved in the passing game. 3 targets, 3 receptions, 49 yards on those 3 receptions, and did have a receiving touchdown, finishing with 17.5 fantasy points. Now, my second waiver wire ad at the running back position is on a bye next week. So if you need help next week, don't consider Latavius Murray. But if you're looking for bench depth and you can sit him for a week, let's just call it what it is. Lat Murray is on the right side of a timeshare with Melvin Gordon in Denver. Okay? Sunday morning against Jacksonville, Mel Gordon carried 9 times, 29 yards and a touchdown. Lat Murray, though, at only 40% rostered, had 5 more carries, 14, for 46 yards, more yards, and he was the guy who got the goal line carry at the end of the game to give Denver the win. Okay? He also had a reception for 13 yards, finished with 12.9 fantasy points. I had Lat Murray in my lineup. I was desperate in the SiriusXM Host League, and he helped me pull out a victory with that performance. He's 40% rostered. It should go up, but just be mindful. You can't use him next week as Denver's on the bye. At number 3, I mentioned Caleb Huntley of Atlanta. Okay, that's a timeshare there. As close to 50-50 as you can get. Algier, 14 carries. Caleb Huntley, 16 effective carries, though. 16 for 91 yards. Difference is, like I said, he doesn't get involved in the passing game. Tyler Algier finished with 17 touches. Caleb Huntley with 16. Again, Atlanta against the Chargers if you're in a desperate need for a running back. Also involved in the running back conversation, Kenyon Drake. Gus Edwards injured on Thursday night. We don't know what the prognosis will be for week 9. Kenyon Drake was the second guy there with Gus Edwards. He went 7 carries, 62 yards. He was effective. 4 receptions on 4 targets. Only 5 yards, but did have a receiving touchdown. 16.7 points. That facing the New Orleans Saints in New Orleans, who just shut out the Raiders. Also available, Ronnie Rivera. Ronnie Rivers. I'm thinking the old coach. Ronnie Rivers of the Los Angeles Rams, undrafted rookie free agent, 1% rostered, 8 carries for 21 yards, leads the Rams in carries in their loss to the 49ers, 4 receptions for 15 yards. Matthew Berry tweeted out about Ronnie Rivers, so Ronnie Rivers garnered a little attention, and he was the lead carrier in that Rams backfield. Okay, 7.6 fantasy points. Tough matchup, though, against the Tampa Bay Bucks in Week 9. And finally, and it's a speculative ad, but as the trade deadline comes along, Kareem Hunt is rumored to be moving out of Cleveland. If that were to happen, take a flyer on Dearness Johnson as well of Cleveland, who would step up behind Nick Chubb. At the wide receiver position, the number 1 wide receiver ad for me this week is Josh Palmer of the Chargers. Bye week 8, was out week 7 with a concussion. His last game he played was week 6. He went 9 for 57 on 12 targets. Now, he comes back. Mike Williams is going to be out for a couple of weeks for the Chargers. Keenan Allen still recovering from a hamstring injury. Josh Palmer, the number 1 wide receiver ad in a terrific spot next week. Chargers against the Atlanta Falcons. Number 2, Rondale Moore of the Arizona Cardinals. 35% rostered. In 3 of his last 4 games, he has 8 or more targets, including this week where he went 7 for 92 on those 8 targets and a touchdown. Finished with 23 fantasy points. Good matchup for the Cardinals against the Seattle Seahawks next week. At number 3, also coming off his bye, Mecole Hardman of the Kansas City Chiefs. 3 straight games coming into his bye week of 12 or more fantasy points with 4 touchdowns as his role continues to grow. Good matchup against the Tennessee Titans defense. At number 4, Garrett Wilson of the New York Jets. With Corey Davis out with an injury, Breece Hall out with an injury, Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore just out to lunch. Garrett Wilson at 47% rostered, a terrific ad and had a big game. 6 for 115 on 7 targets, I should say. Tough matchup, though, next week for the Jets against the Buffalo Bills. That's why Garrett Wilson sits at number 4. And the number 5 wide receiver ad, Terrence Marshall of the Carolina Panthers, was targeted 9 times this week, 4 for 87. We kind of hoped his role would increase once Carolina traded away Robbie Anderson. It has. He had a nice game, 12.7 fantasy points. P.J. Walker, in my opinion, should remain the starting quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. All of a sudden, you trade Christian McCaffrey and your offense looks okay. Deonta Foreman is a beast. Okay, and now you're getting 2 wide receivers. DJ Moore has saved his season, and now Terrence Marshall in a nice spot. So when you look at those wide receivers, Josh Palmer's only 23% rostered. Rondale Moore is 35% rostered. Mecole Hardman only 34%. Garrett Wilson the highest rostered player at 47%. And then finally, Terrence Marshall at 1%. And then finally, at the tight end position, the big injury there was Mark Andrews Thursday night. Isaiah Likely comes in, looks terrific. 6 catches, 77 yards on 7 targets, and a touchdown. 19.7 fantasy points. For me, he's the number one ad at the tight end position, especially if Andrews is going to miss some time. He's only 5% rostered at the Saints in Week 9. Number 2, Tyler Conklin of the Jets. 4th game this season of 10 or more fantasy points. His first 3 games were his first 3 games of the season. Fell off the map, has now reemerged. Big game this week. 6 catches, 79 yards, 2 touchdowns. A Zach Wilson favorite. Only 11% rostered. Only issue with Tyler Conklin. Tough matchup in Week 9 against the Buffalo Bills. At number 3, Greg Dulcich of the Denver Broncos. I've mentioned him a few weeks. I used Dulcich in spots this week. 42% rostered. 4 catches, 87 yards on 5 targets. He has emerged as the clear number 1 tight end in Denver. 12.7 fantasy points. The only issue with Dulcich, Denver is on a bye in Week 9. And then finally, I seem to mention Evan Ingram every week, and I will continue to mention him. 43% rostered. He's got now 4 games with 10 or more fantasy points. 4 catches, 55 yards, and a touchdown for Evan Ingram. 15.5 fantasy points. Jacksonville faces the Vegas Raiders next week. So real quick, the quarterbacks, Fields, Goff, Mariota, and Andy Dalton. Running backs, Tyler Algier, number 1. Lat Murray, Caleb Huntley, Kenyon Drake, Ronnie Rivers of the rookie for the Rams, and then D'Ernest Johnson if Kareem Hunt gets traded. Wide receivers, Rondell Moore, Josh Palmer, Mecole Hardman, Garrett Wilson, Terrence Marshall. At the tight end position, Isaiah Likely, Tyler Conklin, Greg Dulcich, and Evan Ingram. Now, if you're just looking for overall help, the 5 best waiver wire ads for Week 9. At number 5, give me the running back in Atlanta, Tyler Algier. At number 4, Mecole Hardman, the playmaker from Kansas City. At number 3, Rondell Moore of Arizona, more and more involved in that offense. Number 2, Josh Palmer, walking into a smash spot with all the other injuries for the Chargers wide receivers. But the number 1 ad for Week 9 is the quarterback for the Chicago Bears, Justin Fields. Better and better every week. Offense is getting better. They're letting him run, letting him use his legs. So take a look at Justin Fields if you need quarterback help for Week 9. All right, everybody, make sure you like and subscribe right here to the RotoBaller YouTube channel. Look for all the great content all week long, including waiver wires, start, sits, sleepers, and value plays. Head over to RotoBaller.com. Sign up for the Premium Pass, Team Sync tools, lineup optimizers, great articles, you name it. RotoBaller.com has it for you. Save 10% at discount using the promotional code ACES. And give me a follow on Twitter at @ANianoFantasy. As always, thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time right here on RotoBaller Radio.